The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik, and for those who don't know me, I am the co-founder of Financing Solutions, and for the last 14 years, we have been the largest provider of lines of credit to small nonprofits in the United States. Been doing this for a while. The product we have is very popular. And if you're interested in learning more about a line of credit for your nonprofit, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with John Levitt from Public Interest Registry. And today we're going to be talking about how culture affects your nonprofit success. It's something that that I definitely think that culture is the most underrated aspect of running a for-profit or nonprofit. So I'm going to be excited to talk about it today with John. And John Levitt is the president and CEO of Public Interest Registry, PIR, the nonprofit behind the .org domain with over 11 million registrations worldwide. A leader in the domain tech and nonprofit industries, John is nationally recognized as a recognized voice on internet safety. He co-founded Donuts Incorporated, managing one of the world's largest domain portfolios, and served on the Obama administration's online safety and technology working group. John received his JD from Harvard Law School and exemplifies a leadership style that prioritizes employees' happiness. His people-first approach drives PRS success by fostering a supportive and mission-driven workplace. John, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So you must get this question asked a lot. Forget about our subject for a second of culture, but I'm sure our listeners, including myself, are just fascinated with the idea that Public Interest Registry, which owns the .org or is the nonprofit, is even in existence. What could you tell us a little history about it?
Sure. Most people don't know, and when I go to a cocktail party and people ask what I do, they don't realize that this actually exists. But for each what's called top level domain, so .org, .com, .net, .edu, all the others, there's actually a company that operates it and has the authoritative database that says a domain name converts to an IP address that's recognized on the internet. So if you go to your browser, we'll have the authoritative database that says this name converts to this number. And if you put in a name, our systems make sure that you resolve to the right site, to the site that you're trying to get to.
And when did PIR start?
So .org started in 1985. We're hitting our 40th anniversary this year. Public Interest Registry, or PIR, started in 2002, 2003, and took over operating it from a prior operator. So we've been around for a little over 20 years, operating .org. We've grown it from a couple million to we just hit a milestone of over 11 million wonderful .orgs doing amazing work around the world.
And so Congress set up the need for these nonprofits that handle domains such as .org and .com and so .net, so on and so forth. Is it that Congress set this up?
So the U.S. government did way back when the internet was invented, and instead of all of us remembering numbers or memorizing numbers like we do with telephones, the domain name system actually converts that name into a number. So Stephen.org is a lot easier to remember than an IP address that's recognized on the internet. So the domain name system converts a name into a number, and that grew starting in the 80s, and it really obviously blew up with in the late 1990s and in the 2000s.
Cool.
And the rest is history.
Wow, I really didn't know it. I don't think I knew it. Great. Thanks for sharing. So let's just move over to our topic today by how culture affects your nonprofit success. And Now, how long have you been at PIR as the president and CEO?
I've been here. I'm in my seventh year. So
Seventh year.
yeah.
So when you came in as president and CEO, did you uh, um, did you quickly recognize what the culture was at PIR?
Yeah, and culture's always been something that's very important to me. Some people will have the expression that culture eats strategy for lunch. I don't agree with that because I think having a strong culture is part of a strategy. So I think they're intertwined and integrated. One of our core values, one of our key objectives, is to foster a culture of excellence. And so we've been doing that for as long as I've been here, and I think it's of vital importance. Investing in people. People are a nonprofit's greatest asset. Their passion, their dedication, they fuel the impact. They fuel the mission, and so that's very important. We have to get away from the overworked, underpaid, underappreciated model of that some nonprofits have, and the stereotype of folks that work at nonprofits.
So when you came to PIR, they had an they had an established every organization has an established culture, regardless if if you understand that or not. Did you have to enhance the culture that was there? Did you have to make people aware of the culture was there, or was that type of work that was already being done? With that type of work already done, established. This is our culture, and this is how we, hire into it. This is how we encourage the people in the culture. We're going to get a little bit more into this in a little bit, but did you have to do more work in that area?
Yeah, and I don't want to talk about the past too much, but we did make changes, obviously, and made it much more of a focus than it had been in the past. There was an interim period where we were leaderless for a while with an interim head and who was off-site. So having someone here in the office, someone who cares about culture, who cares about very much about integrating culture into a strategy, was something that was a bit of a pivot. Um, I think about there's a Teddy Roosevelt quote: "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care."
Mm.
And you hear that here and there. Teddy Roosevelt gets credit for it, but I really subscribe to that. So it's caring not only about a mission of a nonprofit. We care about our nonprofit mission, uh, but also caring about the people as individuals. And we have an incredibly low attrition rate. We have, our survey results for great places to work are always off the charts. I think it was 98% said we were a great place to work of our employees last time that we were surveyed. And it's a feedback loop, right? If you're giving gratitude and recognition to employees and you're treating them well and investing in your people, it's going to help your mission. And so it's not only the right thing to do, but it's good business from a nonprofit standpoint or a for-profit standpoint as well.
So let's take a step back and go over, just the preliminary stuff, which is when you think of culture, how would you define culture in a broad sense?
From a culture standpoint, it's hard to define it specifically, but it's investing in your people. It's treating people with respect. It's being empathetic. We even folks who are longtime CEOs started off somewhere and they were treated a certain way as they were progressing in their careers. When employees feel satisfied, happy, valued, supported, you're going to do better as an organization. And so, how do you make people feel valued, happy, and supported? There's obviously compensation, but if you look at some big entities, they might be well compensated, but they're not happy. They're not satisfied. They're not feeling the love for the organization. So then, how else do you do that? There's a financial, there's benefits, there's flexibility, time off. We have core hours in the office, so everyone comes in 2 days a week, and we call them collaboration days. I don't want to have people, sitting on Zoom calls all day, but we want people interacting and collaborating and working together on those 2 days. The other days that we have work from home, this is all post-COVID. They could do Zoom calls those days. Flexibility with core hours, as I mentioned, is, we have people come in from 10 to 3. Those are the core hours. So be here to the core hours and then work the rest of the day. If you want at home, if you want to be in the office, great. If you want to work after, that's great too. Everyone gets their work done, but I want people to have flexibility to go. I have my youngest child is a soccer player. Right? I made every soccer game for our high school. You were a high school and college athlete, right? It would be great if your parents were able to go to all your games. Go do that. And then if you need to work after to get your job done, great. I'm totally flexible with that. It's been working. It's been working very well. People feel very motivated, very happy. I think our mission thrives because of it. And I don't think it's a anti-productive thing. I think it's a pro-productive thing.
So when we're talking about what you just expressed is the culture of PIR, but every organization has its own culture. And, I have 2 sons, and I talk to them about what culture means when they before they, go to an interview for a company that they should ask. So tell me about the culture of the company. So, a culture is the personality of the organization. So an example that you gave is the personality with PIR, but if you look at another company, their personality is would be completely different than PIR. And the things that I've learned over the years has been the personality of the company often stems from how it originated. And it always blows me away that you could have an organization with 100,000 employees and how that culture becomes pervasive throughout the organization. It could be around for 100 years, but still that original owner or the biggest influencer at the company created this personality or had this personality and it makes sense because that person, and we're going to give you an example, but that person who was originally the culture guru hired the original people who then hired other people. And so it does make sense, but it still blows me away. So like a good example of culture, which I talked to my sons about, was like, for an example with Apple. And Steve Jobs, of course, the founder of Apple, was known as just being so enamored, determined, and unwavering when it came to design. And you look at Apple today, and that's such a big part of their culture. An unwavering determination for incredible design. And Steve Jobs, of course, is no longer here. I mean, no longer on this earth. So what have you seen that now that you've been at the organization for several years, have you had to work on culture anymore?
Absolutely. I think you always have to work on it. And Steve Jobs is alive in Apple, right?
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
He is. His legacy is pervasive throughout it, which is great. I've worked at an organization.
By the way, respectfully,
Yeah.
He was a horrible person to work for.
Horrible.
He was mean. He was nasty, and he made people work for crazy hours. But people signed up for that, so that's
For
but
sure. Yeah,
so
I've
he
seen the
isn't this.
movies and read the books as well. It
Yes, and
sounds like a
he's
crazy
he's not
culture.
this god that was the nicest guy in the world. He certainly wasn't, but it's an example of culture. But go ahead, finish
Yeah,
your
no, for
thought.
sure. So I've worked at entities that are. I did a startup with four of us and grew that, and I've worked in an 80,000 person company, and I've worked in different sizes in between. But you're absolutely right. That culture uh, goes from not only the founding. When we did the startup, something that was very important to us was to make sure everyone had equity. We wanted everyone to feel ownership in the company, and that worked out well for everyone. 80,000 people. Culture can change, through mergers and acquisitions and
Mm,
through other changes to the organization, new leaders. But I think you're right that there's a pervasive undercurrent based on the history of the company itself. And if there's a company uh, change, you can change the culture, and you have to work on it all the time. I don't think you could rest on laurels. Certainly here, I don't, and when we have surveys, we do a lot of surveys. We have something called Tiny Pulse, where we do survey, like one question surveys here and there, so it's easy for folks to go through. We have weekly all hands meetings, so with a Q&A at the end, if anyone wants to ask any questions, we're very open to having a transparent environment and having everyone feel a sense of ownership. Now, obviously, no one owns a nonprofit. We all own our mission and how we work towards the mission. But it's a big morale boost from my perspective to have people feel that sense of ownership of the mission together.
So the organization's mission, can you tell us what its mission is or purpose?
Sure. So we are a nonprofit that operates .org. So kind of like a museum bookstore, we sell .org domain names to 11.3 million customers that use those names for the betterment of the community and their communities. And the proceeds go to another entity called the Internet Society. That's our sole member, and they use the proceeds to do amazing work around the world. There's a lot of places, even in the United States, where you don't have access to the internet. So they're working on access issues. They're working on free and open internet issues. They're working on internet safety and trust issues. They're working on internet governance issues. How does it work around the world? How do we use the internet effectively? And so that's part of our nonprofit mission. We also want to improve the state of the domain name system itself. For example, we just worked out a partnership with an entity called the Internet Watch Foundation that deals with child sexual abuse material online. And so we work with them where we get alerts if someone's has a known picture of child imagery abuse. We'll get an alert, and then we could work with the hosting company or our registrars or ourselves and make sure it's taken down as soon as possible. So we're the cleanest of all the registries, domain name registries, but that wasn't good enough for us because we want to improve the entire industry, not just ourselves. So we did a sponsorship that we sponsor anyone who was not getting these alerts, any registry that was not getting these alerts before. We're paying for them to get those alerts now because we want, even though they're, you could consider them competitors, we want the entire industry to do better. And we want to make sure that there's no child sexual abuse material online. So that whatever we could do to help that. And of the entities that were not getting these alerts, we're now about 50% of them are getting them thanks to our partnership and our sponsorship. So that's something, in our nonprofit mission. We also want to celebrate and help the 11.3 million .orgs that are doing great work. So we have the .org Impact Awards, where we have an award program for .orgs that are doing amazing work around the world. Our .org of the year last year was called the Yellow Boat of Hope Foundation. And they saw a problem. They were in the Philippines, and they had kids in remote areas swimming to school. They had to swim to school. They had no way to get to school other than wade through water. And so they started with one boat where they built a boat or bought a boat, painted it yellow, and started paddling kids to school to keep them dry. They now have 5,000 boats, and now they're building schools in those remote areas. And it's just an absolutely wonderful organization, and they're doing amazing work. Last year, our org of the year was Hope for Justice, and they do work helping to combat human trafficking around the world. So those are the kinds of organizations. We have different categories, and I encourage folks to go look at our PIR.com site, PIR.org site rather, and look at the various winners and the various folks doing amazing work on .org.
So now going to so we know your mission statements, that what you're trying to accomplish. Now it's obvious to me that your culture is based on really taking great care of the employees that work there. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair. That's very important to us.
So how do you think the culture of taking really good care of your employees has resulted in you achieving the missions?
Great question. So we have very, very, very low attrition, right? We have very few people who leave, and we have to spend less time on replacing people, on recruiting. We're growing, so we obviously do recruiting, but we're not looking at retraining and replacing people. We have people that are here, that are happy, that are motivated, that are experienced. And so it's certainly helps the mission to have our great employees stay and not to lose them to other organizations. And it's the recipe isn't that hard. Treat people well, treat people fairly. Not every nonprofit is going to be well funded, but there are other ways through flexibility, time off. You can give gratitude and recognition in different ways that might not be as costly. But prioritizing employee well-being, it's not just a nice to have. It's really a strategic advantage, and I recommend it highly.
I have to ask this question. I probably would asked it more toward the end, but it's on my mind right now, and that is, how has the Trump administration affected any type of funding to your organization?
Yeah, we don't get federal funding, but our customers obviously do, the .orgs, and they're suffering, right? They're suffering in a number of ways. This funding cuts, the tax bill that's floating around right now has some provisions that might make it less likely that nonprofits get donations. So it's kind of the perfect storm for them. And there's uncertainty, right? So they don't know if they're going to get federal funding or not. They don't know if they're going to get indirect funding from states and elsewhere or not, or they don't know the level. So it's super hard to manage that, to budget, to figure out, are we going to get it or are we not going to get it? Are we going to get some or nothing? I'm on the board of an amazing nonprofit that deals with cancer. So it's the Prevent Cancer Foundation, preventcancer.org. And as far as their work and my work with them, and it's hard because we don't know the certain funding mechanisms and what's happening, but the mission is so important. And if you're looking at USAID funding, or if you're looking at even the National Institutes of Health and funding for cancer research or other medical issues, they still don't know what's going to happen and what's going to happen long term. So it's very hard, and they're struggling, and we're doing our part to help celebrate them and help them wherever we can.
So you have the mission statements, you have the culture that you've identified, and then you have the action items underneath it, which has been all the various programs that you mentioned about employee satisfaction and all those initiatives. So it all fits together in a beautiful puzzle. When you first, was the startup that you did, or was that the first business or that you were involved with, or that come later?
So I'm not, unlike you, I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I am a single entrepreneur. I had been more in the for-profit realm through, I think you mentioned I have a law degree. I went through, the big law firm, went in-house at a telecom company. Then I joined the domain name industry. And so I've been at, again, an 80,000 person company. And then I went to a 1,000 person company. And then I did the startup with four of us. And we grew that to, well over 100 people.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you like how you evolved in regards to understanding that culture. Cause I'm a big believer that culture is a huge, actually had one company that I started, that I identified the culture before the company even opened its doors. Before we even actually started, I said, this is what the culture of this company is going to be, which is unusual because after starting a couple of companies, I realized how important culture was to driving the success of the organization. And so I said, I'm not going to wait for my culture to be identified. I'm going to create it from the very beginning. And so I evolved, and I saw that because, like you, I worked for my first 8 years, a very 100,000 employee company, and then I started my entrepreneurial journey from that point forward. But what was your evolution in understanding how important culture was?
It was very similar to yours. When we did our startup, we had many conversations, usually over a drink or two, about what did we want to do, not only substantively with the new company, but how do we want to run the company, and that was as important as the substance of what we would be doing. And spent a lot of time and effort to come up with a culture of prioritizing employees, valuing employees. Because like we said before, that kind of prioritization and value will reap rewards. It's like an investment in anything else. We raise money, and investing, whether it's money, time, resources, into employees is paramount. It's very important to a successful organization.
What would you say to a listener who's listening right now, who hears your culture, and maybe they don't have a culture, or they have one, but they haven't really identified, and they're like, oh, I like what John's saying about his culture. Why don't I just replicate what John's doing? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, every culture is going to be different, but there are fundamentals that'll be the same. It's investing in people, caring about employee happiness, caring about well-being, caring about flexibility, and having we could reap the rewards of treating people like you want to be treated. Being an empathetic leader, super important. We all started somewhere. And I had my share of yellers, when I started my career, and I learned a lot of what I wanted as a leader by not doing what what I experienced early in my career, and I think if people want to build a culture, and it's really just a focus, because we all have it in us. It's just a focus and saying, yeah, I know. I really care about whatever issue you care about, and whatever your mission is, whether it's clean water or human trafficking or anything else. Part of that mission has got to be investment in people, and not just by dollars, but just by focus, by caring, by expressing gratitude, having a philosophical bent towards transparency and ownership of the mission, and a shared value system. All those are incredibly important, and again, you're gonna be better off for that. It's worth the investment.
Yeah, the the culture of Financing Solutions, one of the companies that I'm a managing partner at, is based on really two things. The first thing is that we make really smart decisions. We're smart, and we make smart decisions. And that really comes into play because we are providing unsecured lines of credit. And what that means is, like, nobody really gives anybody a line of credit unless they have some type of security to back it up. like an asset. It could be your equity in your house. It could be stocks, bonds. It could be a whole bunch of different things that nobody really does that. And we are one of the few providers that provide an unsecured line of credit. So we have to make very smart decisions about who we give money to. So that's an important culture of our organization. And the second part of the culture of our organization is that we really treat our customers super, super well. Like our customer service is fantastic. You're almost always involved with an owner because we don't really have a lot of employees. We're very hands-on. We're providing you with our money, so it's not someone else's money; it's our money. And so, we are very involved. And so the reason why I raised that is I couldn't use John's culture at my company because it just wouldn't fit. And, certainly we treated our people who work here well, but, it isn't something that is like strategically the way we're going to excel as a company. We're going to excel based on making good decisions so that we don't have a lot of defaults. So the reason I raise that is the idea is that every company has its own culture, and you need to not really, I think treating employees well should be part of everybody's culture, right? But it may not be your only one.
For sure. First of all, it sounds like you provide an amazing service, and congratulations on that. Like we talked about earlier, nonprofits have need and have uncertainty at this point. So it sounds like your service is pretty wonderful for that. But I think you do follow our culture, which is again investing in employees, and if you have people leaving, which because that'll happen if you don't invest in your employees, that's gonna harm your business. And it sounds like you don't do that. You do follow an investment in employees and caring about their well-being, and you're sounds like regardless of what the business model is, that's a recipe that you're following and I'm following, and everyone should follow.
Yeah, I mean, I often talk about in a lot of my podcasts, I talk about how I guess when I think of nonprofits, I think they could fall into three different types of cultural traits. Just thinking out loud, the first one would be is an incredible drive that they have, and you could have this nuance, but I think it all falls into three categories: an incredible drive to help their cause. And you could have all the nuances around that. It might be reducing or eliminating homelessness, or child literacy, or there's an incredible drive for that. And from what we see often, is 90% of the culture of the organizations that we work with are in that area, because the type of organizations we work off are typically under $5 million in revenue. So they're smaller nonprofits, right? Anywhere between $200,000 of revenue a year and $5 million. So they're very driven toward their cause. And then you have the other ones that are growing very rapidly, and they recognize that, and this is what I say on a lot of the podcasts, and don't please take it the wrong way, is that if you want to be a successful nonprofit that is sustainable forever, you have to migrate your culture from delivering on that cause to raising money. That you have to move to the idea of fundraising, grant writing. That has to be your core competency, because if you can't do that, you can't help your cause. Because there's plenty of nonprofits who have great causes, but because they're not good or care about raising money, it's not that they don't care, but they don't spend all their time on it. and then they just dissolve because, let's face it, raising the money and redistributing it into your cause is the name of the game. And then you have the third one, and that is, which I think it can embrace the other two, is what John's talking about, and that's treating people, your employees, really well. And one of the key numbers is, if at least I think it used to be, anything over a 10% turnover ratio on a year by year basis in your organization means that your turnover is way too high. It used to be 10% or 5%. I forgot.
Yeah, it's more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
I think, if you see more than 10% turnover in your organization, then, and I always say this, if you see more than 10% turnover ratio, and I'm going to be blunt with you, it's not the pay and it's not the job. I hate that, it's the management.
Agreed.
Right? Turnover is always a function of management and how you treat your employees, because people will stay if they're treated super well. And I think, John, you're exactly an example of saying that. Correct?
Yeah, I agree. Culture is one part of a successful enterprise, right? But it's an important part, and people sometimes forget about it. But you're absolutely right. If your nonprofit's mission is to help with hunger or poverty, and you need resources, obviously, to do that, responsible growth, diversity of revenue sources, very important.
Yeah.
And culture, always is an integral part of that, but it's not the substantive area necessarily that you're dealing with in your mission. So they all work hand in hand. Culture plus your mission. How do you succeed in fundraising? How do you succeed in having diversity of resources? How do you succeed in responsible growth? Because sometimes nonprofits fall into the trap of growing too quickly.
Yep.
And then they have a hard problem to deal with that.
Yep. I want to ask this question. You did answer it earlier. I think because you're dealing with so many nonprofits, I want to recircle back to this. And within the last year of 2025, the recording of this podcast is the May 29th of 2025. In the last 5 months, what have you seen nonprofits doing that, and I'm sure the answer is going to be obvious, but I want to ask it, that's different than it was in 2024, 2023?
Holding their breath.
Yeah.
The collective breaths. We're in the Washington, D.C. area, so we probably have it a little more acute than others. We have neighbors who are losing jobs more readily from the government. We have the impact of DOGE and folks on probation, things like that. It's hard. So nonprofits are feeling that as well. They're holding their breaths. They're trying to figure out what their funding sources are. Hopefully, they're calling you up to be protected as a with their line of credits and other things to do, budgeting, high, medium, low. Often you do that anyway, but this year really matters because we don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea. Again, May 29th, as you say, we have a tax bill that we don't know if that's going to be approved by the United States Senate at this point or signed into law, or it's going to be changed. We don't know the impacts on private donations to nonprofits. We don't know the impacts of, who's filling the void, the vacuum that might be that is being created by this lack of funding. And how does the nonprofit community get together to strengthen each other and not handle everything on their own? I think that's something that we're seeing more of. We're seeing more nonprofits collaborating together in their respective industries, whether it's cancer research or clean water or anything else. Hopefully that's a silver lining for folks, that we will be getting together and doing more together. And when there's an external threat, people look for like-minded entities, and how could we work together to settle things down. And hopefully
we
things
saw
will
that
settle
during
down.
we saw that during COVID. That was one of the action items that some of the speakers that I had on the podcast talked about. That combine with other like-minded organizations is an opportunity. I just want to circle back to this because you mentioned it caught my attention. You had mentioned that the new tax bill that has yet to be approved yet. Is there anything in there that caught your attention that you know about that relates to the nonprofit sector that you think we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, what's going to happen with the increase in standard deduction, for example? If that goes up dramatically, and people can't deduct contributions to charitable organizations, 501c3 organizations, the fear is that people will donate less, and therefore nonprofits will have fewer resources from individuals. So that's probably the biggest impact. There are some reports that there'll be $50 billion less in charitable contributions next year. We don't know. We didn't know with COVID. A lot of nonprofits actually got a bump in COVID because people were home on their computers, and it makes it easy to donate. We run not only .org, but we run .gives and .giving and .charity and .foundation. All, you could tell, thematic in the mission-driven community. We saw additional activities on our domains because people were home during COVID. Whereas the travel industry obviously got hit pretty hard, travel and entertainment during COVID, but the online industries fared relatively well. So who knows what'll happen? We don't have a crystal ball, but we got to be prepared, and we got to help nonprofits be prepared. We support nonprofits, and we have a .org learning center where we could help nonprofits with educational tools and materials to help them succeed. So it really takes a village at this point, and we're taking a wait and see approach, but being prepared.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. It was a very interesting discussion. I'd like to thank so much John Nevitt from Public Interest Registry for coming on today's podcast. I really enjoyed it. And, if you are interested in learning more about the line of credit for your organization, please feel free to visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And also, if you liked this podcast or any of the other ones that we've had over close to 300, please feel free to share it with a friend. I think we have so many great guests on, like John. And John, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, just go to pir.org, pir.org, and you can see all the wonderful materials and our contact information. So I encourage you to do that.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it.
So I want to thank all our listeners, not just for listening, but also for trying to make the world a better place. We certainly need you. And, it's a rough job, very rewarding. But I just want to remind you that you're no good to your friends, your employees, or your cause if you don't take care of yourself. There's a lot of burnout that happens in this industry, and you have to keep that in mind every single day. So make sure you're prioritizing yourself, the things that keep you energized, exercise, praying, meditation, whatever it is that really helps you be your best, because we really need you. I know John and I are doing our own thing in a small way, but you guys are out there every day, and I thank you for that. So other than that, I want to thank you for listening to the Nonprofit MBA podcast, and have a fantastic day, everybody.